Scleroderma Foundation of California sits down with Steffens Scleroderma Foundation to talk with Chief Medical Officer Dr. Lee Shapiro and Executive Committee Member of the Board Amy Gietzen. We want to thank both of you for joining us today to talk about the Steffens Scleroderma Foundation. And before we get started and get into the history of the Steffens Scleroderma Foundation, can we learn a little bit more about you guys? So Dr. Shapiro, we'll start with you. Can you share a little bit about your background on how and a little bit about you and what you were doing before you got involved with the Steffens Scleroderma Foundation?
Sure, and I want to thank you very much for having us. I did my internship and residency in Pittsburgh and discovered while there that it was the leading center in the world for the study of scleroderma at the time. And this was in the late 1970s. In fact, it was one of only two scleroderma centers in the country then, the other being in Charleston, South Carolina, and one was developing also at UCLA around the same time. I decided on the basis of my exposures to rheumatology to become a rheumatologist and pursued fellowship there. It was the golden age of scleroderma research at Pittsburgh, and that Dr. Rodnan, who developed the skin scoring, still employed, Dr. Metzger, who made many contributions, and Dr. Virginia Steen were the faculty members. And I had close collaboration interactions with each of them. I initially went into private practice, but because there was such a strong brand identity of Pittsburgh and scleroderma, I started getting many referrals in my practice in Albany, New York, from other rheumatologists with individuals with scleroderma. And this over time became the focus of my practice. I got involved with the Scleroderma Foundation as it developed, when it had a Capital District chapter, and became the medical advisor to that organization. And then I developed an increasing interest in research because it was obvious how many unanswered questions, how many untreatable problems there were related to scleroderma. I went to the Royal Free Hospital in London in 1999 as a visiting physician to pursue some research projects there and just see how they ran their clinic. And what I learned was that they really reached out beyond the realm of rheumatology. They had pulmonary specialists, cardiology specialists, gastroenterology specialists come and spend time in their clinic. And then I returned to Albany and pursued a more academic career, moved over to Albany Medical College and ran the scleroderma clinic there. So that's my story.
Now that is a beautiful story. That is really impressive, your background. First of all, you don't look old enough to say that you've been doing this since the 70s. And I think about you knowing for the Rodnan skin score, the physician that developed that, and to know that you have this great tie to these wonderful physicians that sounds like you learned under, and that's where a lot of your passion came from for scleroderma. Is that correct?
That is absolutely the case. They were incredible role models, and Dr. Metzger and Dr. Steen are still very engaged in scleroderma and remain incredible role models to me even now.
Yeah, I bet. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think when you think about what you did at Royal Hospital too, that's super impressive that they would bring in these other specialties and have them learn there. We've got fellows and residents that, go through these clinics and learn a little bit, but this sort of kind of shapes a little bit of what it sounds like helped get the idea into Steffens. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but now I can kind of see, hearing a little bit about your background, how this came about. So I think it's beautiful. It's really impressive. And I thank you for sharing that. Amy, can you do the same? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Thank you again for having us. Um, so mine's a little different. I'm not a doctor, but I'm a patient. So I was diagnosed pretty early on at the age of 19 with systemic diffuse scleroderma. Um, and I had a really hard time finding care. It took me over 5 years, and I ended up where Dr. Shapiro did some of his education and residency in at Pittsburgh. And oddly enough, Dr. Metzger was the first doctor that saw me that was a scleroderma specialty doctor, which is a little fun fact. Um, and as I moved through kind of the disease, probably 10 years in, I realized that there wasn't a lot of, resources and things out there for young adults. And I had never even met somebody that was young that had scleroderma like myself. And that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. I wanted to have more community for young adults. I feel like this disease affects the younger community, a little differently than maybe it would the geriatric community or older community. So I reached out to what is now the foundation and just said I wanted to start an online support group. So I started the Scleroderma Superstars probably about about 12 years ago. And it was an online only kind of meetup thing for resources. And oh, I would say over the first year, I ended up with 5,000 members.
Wow.
So I moved it over and started to do young adult panels, resources, workshops at the conferences, and just really started to hone in on advocacy, doing Capitol Hill, lobbying for research and funding. And that's really kind of where I honed my craft of as a patient educator and advocacy person. And then I heard of the Steffens Foundation. I knew Dr. Shapiro to be a trailblazer in the community. They asked me to be a keynote speaker for their interprofessional education event or IPE. I immediately said yes. And that was kind of my first big speaking event that I did. It was in person in Albany.
What year?
Uh, it was in 2018, I think. Yes. That was our first IPE, 2018. And they've gotten me ever since. I just fell in love with the foundation. I fell in love with the work they do, fell in love with the people, and just have been moving up the ladder ever since. And just being kind of a resource for scleroderma patients in the community and healthcare professionals and rising healthcare professionals throughout my 26 years of living with this disease.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive too, Amy. Yeah, you are also a trailblazer yourself, and I think about the many different platforms. No matter what it is, I can be in a meeting for rare disease and something with advocacy, a spin, the Scleroderma Patient Intervention Network, and I see Amy. Amy, you've always been really driven, and you are a force to be reckoned in the scleroderma community, and we are appreciative of you.
Thank you, Tina.
So we really want to understand, the Steffens Scleroderma Foundation. Sometimes that's a seashells kind of moment.
It is.
So, Dr. Shapiro, can we start with you? Can you share, what is Steffens Scleroderma Foundation and what drove you to get involved? And also, I thought when I was looking at your website about Dagos, I want to know a little bit about how are you affiliated with Dagos Foundation?
So the start of the Steffens Foundation was 16 years ago when a woman, Helen Polenz, who was the mother of Ann Steffens, caught up with me at a scleroderma walk and handed me an envelope and said, "This is for your research." And when I opened the envelope, there was a a check for a large amount made out to me personally.
Wow.
And I had to think what to do with that. She was very active in the Scleroderma Foundation. I knew she wanted me to do something different in the realm of scleroderma, but something that wasn't being done. So the path we started on was trying to fill some of the gaps. And in the realm of scleroderma research, it was the idea of pursuing projects that are collaborative in nature, that involve many different centers, but also many different disciplines, because so many of the research questions in scleroderma require expertise beyond the realm of the rheumatologist. So physicians in other specialties, but also health professionals in other disciplines entirely, like dentistry or nutrition or occupational therapy. And then when it came to the realm of education, the thought was there are many sources of education in scleroderma for patients. We're not primarily a patient service organization. We decided not to try to get in the zone of any other organization. And there certainly are a lot of sources for physicians. But what was missing was education in scleroderma for all the other disciplines that individuals with scleroderma will need to turn to in the course of their disease, whether it be occupational therapy, dentistry, pharmacy, nutrition, social work. And individuals in all those disciplines really weren't getting any training or exposure or knowledge of scleroderma in their education. We really wanted to fill that gap, and that's our first major educational venture was this interprofessional education, and I really want Amy to speak about that. Amy, as you mentioned, she's really for me being associated with Amy is like maybe working with Liza Minnelli for for the last decade. It's I feel I'm working with a star. She really has star power, and I think she's given us a lot of the life that's driven us forward.
That is so beautiful. You just made my heart swell twice. First, when you started talking about this background, and then second, when you mentioned Amy, and then I see Amy's face light up. Should have highlighted you so everybody can see that moment because I got to witness it. And my heart swells listening to the way that you focused on this. You know, being in this field myself since 1990 and working in rheumatology at UCLA, I saw a lot of these patients, come and go and not always have the opportunity to see physicians at that caliber, and making sure that there was some type of learning, and being at these teaching hospitals, they get that opportunity. But some of the areas that you mentioned aren't the ones that we really see a lot. You've got your different specialties, but you don't hear a lot about what you were saying, social work, occupational therapy. I just went blank on the third one that I wanted to say that you mentioned, but you mentioned a few that aren't the norms that we always hear. And so many of these people go out into the community and now understand you're giving them a broader perspective when that patient comes in. So they're not just looking at one thing, they're really focusing on the patient as a whole. And people don't realize that when it comes to a disease like scleroderma, there's so many different factors involved with symptoms, and so you give them that broader picture, and the patients are fortunate to have that you're helping them focus on that. I hope I'm making sense, but thank you. And so Amy, as he spoke about that, why don't you go ahead and pick up from there?
Sure. So thank you, Dr. Shapiro. That was so kind of you. So the IPE is something that we created in 2018. I was not the initial founder of it, but I was, like I said, a keynote speaker, and then I sat on the expert panel as a patient educator, and then did some of the breakout rooms. So initially, the IPE was a local event that we collaborated with partners in the local universities, medical universities of Albany. So Russell Sage College, Albany College of Pharmaceuticals, Albany Medical College. And what we did was work with their directors of different educational disciplines. So pharmacology, OT and PT, medical, nursing, social workers, and things like that. And we enlisted their rising healthcare professionals or their students to come to our event. And then we recruited patients, mostly from Dr. Shapiro's practice at the time. I think I was one of the only patients that was not from his practice when I first came along. And we had an event. So the event basically was to showcase how scleroderma is the prime kind of disease and highlight the disease for collaborative care, multidisciplinary care, having multiple specialty doctors that kind of cover your disease as a whole. Because we thought it was very important to showcase that and also showcase the disease because, like Dr. Shapiro said, the disease wasn't really being showcased to like general practitioners or physical therapy, hand specialty doctors or dental. And we thought it was really important to help with earlier diagnosis and educating like students so that if and when they did graduate, they would see a patient and maybe possibly know, hey, this looks like scleroderma to me.
I love that.
So we did the first 3 events in person locally in Albany. So the event really is like a welcome. We do the keynote speech, which I did. We did kind of a little bit of a lecture on the art of active listening that Heather Friends does. She is the director for simulation at Albany Medical College and a dear friend of mine. She's also a scleroderma patient. And then we would do an expert panel where we would have specialty physicians or doctors from these certain disciplines. So like nursing, physical therapy, pharmacology, nutrition, and they would talk about collaboration of care, scleroderma, and how best to treat. We actually did one where I was a patient and we had students come up and give me like a mini consult, and Heather would kind of go in and talk about the right way to ask a patient a question and the wrong way. So it turned out really well. And then COVID hit and we really thought about maybe not doing it. But then we decided, we really need to kind of push forward with this. We had great return on investment in it. Everybody really enjoyed it. The patients wanted to do it. They signed up every year. And so we decided to do it virtually. And we continue to do it virtually to this day. And to date, we've trained over 1,300 healthcare students. And we now have an educational training program for the patients. So they kind of get, it's a program that I started called the Art of Advocacy. And so they kind of get to know, like, what is an interprofessional education event? Why do we want you to do it? Why do we want you to tell your story? How can you tell your story to be the most effective for these students? It's a virtual class and it's not mandatory, but we highly encourage that they take it before they participate. And since 2018, we recruited, trained, and have on our roster over 70 scleroderma patients that participate each year in our interprofessional education event. And this year, we actually did one with a healthcare university that we kind of like replicated for them. So it was their event and we came in and partnered with them, which is the first. We've been trying to do that for years to replicate, to get this across the country. And so we were really proud and happy. We did it with Hofstra University. and it was a big success, and it's it's part of my love language to be able to do this. And I really look to Dr. Shapiro as a mentor and a leader in this community. And he really provided like 50 patients for us in the early days. And now we recruit patients from all over the country, Hawaii, and even internationally. We've had our last IPE, we had somebody from the Philippines actually log in and do it. So it's been fantastic to be able to do that and meet all these patients from across the world.
That's wonderful, Amy. As you were talking, I thought about a couple things. When it's, I keep going back to fellowships and residencies when someone will say, so happens my doctor figured out what I had because they trained under a scleroderma specialist. But
Sure.
what it sounds like you guys are doing is not just the rheumatologist. You guys are focusing on other medical professionals out there. And as a result of that, someone else could see or understand these symptoms of scleroderma, and the patient's going to get maybe a quicker diagnosis as a result of that. And we need more of that. I remember when I worked at UCLA, we would have skin scoring sessions, and the doctors there would train rheumatologists. Sometimes it would be when they would be in town for a conference, and they would
Sure.
take advantage of it, and we would get several patients in the rooms, and then we would have a doctor that knows how to do the skin score training with the patient that gave their time, so they can go out in the world and understand the importance of a Rodnan skin score in a scleroderma consult, or just in their practices. But again, this is just focused on rheumatology. So what you guys are doing is you're educating the other medical professionals out there. And so when you had these medical students, both in person and virtually, it sounds like, do like a mini consult on you, were there a bunch of different specialties in that? Who were these?
Yeah, so I think I forgot like a chunk of this. So during the IPE, we do these breakout rooms, like uh, we did them at round tables in person, and on in virtual, we do them in little breakout sessions. So we put two patients. We try to do one with diffuse scleroderma, one with limited scleroderma, so they get the difference. And
Beautiful.
then we kind of variegate students from multiple disciplines. So we'll try have some from medical, some from pharmacy, some from nutrition, some from dental, all be in a breakout room, about 6 to 8 students per two patients. And they will get an hour session where the patients will get to share their story. And then the students will get to ask questions, not only to the patients, but to other disciplines. So they get that
Right.
cross-disciplinary effect, because what we really wanted to focus on was how this disease is, you need one more than one specialty doctor. And it's so important for doctors and specialty physicians to be able to speak to one another and communicate, because it's important to the patient. And also the patient is included in that team. They're at the core of that team. So that was kind of the crux of how and why we did that. So maybe that gives a little more context.
Yeah, and I do think it's important because I always ask when we talk to new families that are wanting to learn more and find resources. I ask them how long they've had their symptoms versus when they were diagnosed and who diagnosed them. And it's interesting that when some will say, "You're never going to believe who did it for me," it's because they learned, they either trained under somebody or something like what you are doing with Steffens. And I remember when I first heard about Steffens, I think everything was very limited to just New York. But it sounds like you guys are you've expanded that now, and I even think your the patients that were the educators were also sort of just in that area, right? And you
Yes.
mentioned that, and that now, when did you start expanding out to reach people from other states,
So in terms of
countries?
Steffens and the board, we expanded, I think, probably around when I became a board member, which was in 2020 or 2019. We started to get other board members that had specific skills that could help us grow our organization, not just locally. So we reached out because I'm from Buffalo, New York. We have other board members from um, North Carolina or South Carolina,
Oh,
both.
both.
Okay. We have some from the West Coast, from Central United States. So we have about 13 board members for the foundation. And then when we started to do it, the IPE virtually is really when we cracked the code because we needed patients that were willing to do it virtually and knew how to access Zoom or WebEx or whatever. And so I started to recruit. I just recruited my heart out. I was in charge of doing patient recruitment. I had a lot of connections through my, 2 decades of living with scleroderma, and I just posted it all over social media, went to my friends who ran support groups, came to you, Tina, came to you, Alejandra, and was like, look, we need these patients. Can you help? And you guys were so welcoming and really accepting of the program. And so that's kind of how we grew.
Think that's nice to hear. Thank you for saying that. And we talk about this all the time. There are people who have been diagnosed with scleroderma, and they are so happy that there is outreach, education, resources, support groups, and for many, they just want to go to a support group. They want to have this open forum, meet other people, get advice, and get support. But there are people who say, I want to do more.
Mhm.
And, volunteer work comes in so many different forms. And one of them is this: you're giving of your time and you're educating on the disease. And this is so important. And what I love about what you guys are doing is the personal story. When I talk about skin score, it's so great these doctors understand. And now they have an understanding of how to perform one. But you are allowing the physicians to see a personal side also of scleroderma, because you're allowing that story and learning all these different little areas that scleroderma can touch a life. So you're empowering the patients and
Yeah, it was really
educating the
important for
medical
us to do that.
professionals. Yeah, and there's a validation that these patients get from that as well. This is validating their why can't I think of it? Their journey,
Yes.
and you're an example to that, and you're showing them that they can be more than that. It's something that we've been trying to embody lately, letting families know that there is more out there when it comes to this disease. What can you do to make a difference too? So that's what you
Well,
guys are
we
doing.
also kind of wanted to show Tina that the patient is really kind of a sponge of information for these healthcare providers because they live with it every day. And over the last 5 years, too, we've also, I've kind of developed this program. Uh, I was lucky enough to be accepted at Harvard Macy Institute to do a year of kind of school, which Steffens helped me afford to go to. And I kind of developed this program called Patients as Educators Initiative. We just rolled out our first program with Albany Medical College. We did it with Dagos disease patients, which I'm super thrilled about because Dagos is uber rare, and I'll let Dr. Shapiro touch on that a little bit more, but it's very hard to find patients. And so what it is we recruit like we do for the IPE, and we train also like we do for the IPE. And then we send these patients into the actual classrooms of these healthcare professional students, and they again share their story with these students one-on-one. And so it's a little different than IPE because it's not multiple disciplines, but it's able to show that scleroderma awareness and early diagnosis for patients because we're teaching the entire class or the entire interest group. We did it with the dermatology interest group, our first go at it. We had about a dozen or so students that were dermatologists or up and coming dermatologists. We had a doctor who, as a student, participated in the IPE, Dr. Samantha Sattler. She did an overview of what Dego's disease is. And then we had two Dego's disease patients, one who's a board member of ours, Teresa, and another who we recruited from Canada, share their medical journey and story of getting diagnosed, how they live with Dego's, how important it is for, students to know what it is. And it was really well received. We did some post surveys and stuff, and it's been excellent. And so we're getting ready to do a scleroderma patients as educator initiative in maybe June or July with my home state, New York, but it's the University of Buffalo. So I'll actually go in person and do it where this was virtual.
Yeah, this is beautiful. I think about, CME, and, we worked on a CME program of early detection in scleroderma. And as a result, we're trying to hope that, doctors of different specialties will understand that for the same reason. But again, that's a patient, that's a medical perspective, and you're bringing in the patient perspective. And I think it's impactful for the doctors to get this personal view of the patient. You're not just hearing the medical jargon, you're actually hearing and seeing this person living with scleroderma. And as you know, some you can right away tell that scleroderma is in their life, and for others, you can't. You're giving them the opportunity to see that and to understand that there's different levels of progression in the way scleroderma is manifested in each patient. And so I think that's wonderful.
Dr. Shapiro used to tell me when he was a resident that the most impactful kind of things that stayed with him the most were when they had actors come in and portray themselves as patients, and they had to kind of look at them or examine them or talk to them and learn about their diagnosis. So it really stuck with me when he shared that with me. And that was a big part of how I developed the patients as educators, because I wanted the patients to not only be empowered to tell their story, but I wanted the students to realize that the patients are, like I said, a wealth of information about the disease because they live with it every day.
Yeah, and it what popped up in my head when I talk to different patients is when they have a doctor that doesn't know scleroderma, and they'll say, "Well, we don't see scleroderma on you." I mean, they say that. These doctors actually say that. And so having a patient with limited scleroderma that might not have a lot of the outwardly appearance, and somebody with systemic where you can really see the difference, and knowing that those same patients can have some of the same internal involvement. So again, it's beautiful, the work that's being done, and the opportunity to reach so many people on different levels. With you saying that, you keep mentioning Dego's. So Dr. Shapiro, I saw on the website too, it's there's an affiliation with Dego's, and I think I remember hearing about Dego's, when I first peered into Steffens, I think through you, Amy. But it would be nice for our audience to understand, how is there an affiliation? What is Dego's?
Okay, I'm going to do that. I just wanted to pop in one other thought while I still have it,
Sure.
which is about patients as educators. And what we discovered, and it's true with Dego's as well as with scleroderma, that although Amy does train them as educators, so many patients with scleroderma or Dego's disease or any rare disease must become educators if they have a disease that involves many different organ systems and takes them to many different offices. And they will often see individuals who say, "I've never seen someone with scleroderma or Dego's disease, and tell me about it." And so we realized we had this untapped resource of patients who really came to us already equipped to be educators because they were so practiced at it. They've had to do it so many times, and we're giving them a bigger audience than just the one physician or the one occupational therapist or the one nutritionist that they're seeing. Dego's disease is not scleroderma, but the two can occasionally overlap. So Dego's disease is an ultra rare disease, which only involves maybe 100 individuals in the world. Um, but there is some similarity to scleroderma in that it presents with skin findings, and somewhere between a third to two-thirds of individuals with those skin lesions can go on, if untreated, to have catastrophic internal complications, whether it's the gastrointestinal tract or the neurologic system, sometimes the eye, sometimes the heart and the lung. And there was a woman in England who had this disease, felt she was the only person in the world who had it. She couldn't find a doctor or a patient who was familiar with it. So she started a website which became a worldwide community for individuals with this disease. And she carried this on for several decades. When I first encountered an individual with Dego's disease, it's where I went to for some of my information and also for physician networking. And when she wanted to retire from it, we took it on. Teresa Slayton, Amy mentioned, is the administrator of that website. It so happens that about 5% of individuals with scleroderma, often those who have the most severe vascular complications, may, if examined really closely, have skin lesions that look just like Dego's. So it was kind of a natural for us to have Dego's disease under our umbrella, but they are distinct diseases.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Lee, you have a personal relationship with Dego's as well, right? Sorry,
Well, yes. So the story is of my own engagement is a little different from how I got involved with scleroderma, but someone walked into my office who was referred to me by his pediatrician, and he had just been diagnosed with Dego's disease. And at that time, which was 16 years ago, he and his parents had already, gone to the internet to read whatever they could, and came in all rather grim-faced because every single paper of systemic Dego's at that time culminated in a story of death, and there was no treatment. And he developed systemic disease. He was in the ICU with bowel perforations, and he was dying when, by the miracle of the internet, I learned of a treatment that had been used in one patient 6 weeks before. And it was just like Dego's had been a disease I'd never heard of. It was a drug I'd never heard of, but we were able to obtain the drug within a couple of days, get it infused. And like Lazarus, he recovered such that he was able to resume doing sit-ups, playing soccer, and eventually came to work in our office. So when you have encounters like that, it impacts not just the survivor, but those who are standing at the bedside and see the evolution. So I'm happy to say sometimes you see really wonderful things happen.
That's beautiful, inspiring, and I'm glad that Amy, that you made sure that he elaborated on that. That's beautiful, really beautiful. It's interesting because with rare disease, so many patients don't have hope. I can imagine how scary that was, and this sounds even more rare, so it's probably even more difficult, and that you were able to get that treatment so quickly. Very impressive. Thank you for sharing that. Alejandra, you had a few questions that you wanted to ask Dr. Shapiro and Amy.
Yes. How can patients get involved with the Steffens Foundation?
Sure. So we have a website. We also have a website for Dego's disease as well. They can go to the website and there is a volunteer form that they can fill out if they're interested in volunteering for our foundation. If they're interested in volunteering for the IPE, we haven't kind of built a section on our website for that yet, but they can always leave a note in the form saying they're interested in the IPE, or they can contact me via social media or my email. Um, and we also partner sometimes with the Scleroderma Foundation of California, and they kind of share our IPEs and the QR codes when we're having them, when we recruit. So you can be on the lookout for those. We're not due to have another one until next year. But we are planning on doing a bunch of patients as educators. So there will be a flyer and a form to sign up coming out for that as well pretty soon. But we would love to have you as a volunteer, as a board member, as a patient educator. We're always looking for people that are willing and passionate about scleroderma or Dego's disease to come and be a part of our family.
That's beautiful. I was checking out your website and I was looking at your board members and I saw Carrie Connolly on there. And that just warmed my heart. Talk about a woman with passion about scleroderma. So you got some very impressive people on your board that do have a passion for this disease. So I think it's really great to hear that. And we really enjoyed letting everybody know, and we want to keep that going when you have these events going on. And while this will help people know that they can go to your website, they can reach out to you. When there's these opportunities, we want to share them with our support group leaders that in turn share it with their members. We want to put it on our social media and make sure that people know, because it's important. We want patients to have a voice and feel empowered and validated that they got to get that out. And you guys are providing this beautiful platform. So we're really glad that we have that opportunity. I know that one of our support group leaders in Hawaii said that she did your program recently. So
Tiari?
Really happy. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's what you want. All the different backgrounds, ages, levels of the disease. That's what you're giving people so they can see. I always say one thing, scleroderma does not discriminate.
No.
It really just hits every different type of age. And so it's great that you guys are doing that. Anything you wanted to add on that, Dr. Shapiro?
Well, yes. So first, we might just say what the website is, which is Steffens, Steffens Scleroderma.org, Steffens-Scleroderma.org. I would say also that from these events, both the students and the involved patients are incredibly engaged, excited, want to do more. After each event, we've had a few students from different disciplines, from pharmacy, from occupational therapy, from medicine, inquire about doing research with us and have been engaged in projects, and we have and it's gone on to presentations at national and international scientific meetings. So these encounters, hopefully they will impact their care in the future, their awareness, but it's also in the moment, it's gotten them intellectually curious and involved. I have also want to say that this process, in terms of anticipating a question about fun facts, it's one of the most creative, maybe the most creative process that I've been engaged in terms of how to turn everyone's problems related to scleroderma into creative solutions. And one is just enormously gratifying to see how meaningful it is for individuals with scleroderma to turn their life experience into something that's of educational value to a lot of different people, and to give them an audience so that they know everything that they've gone through was not for naught. It's really hopefully going to impact the course of care in the future. And in the process, it has put both Amy and myself, well, first in contact with each other, which has been a great pleasure, but also with a network of researchers, a network of clinicians, and networks of other individuals with a passion for this disease, whether they be physicians engaged in it or individuals who've dealt with it for large parts of their lifetime.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Amy was one of those people. You look at how young she was when she first started and the advocate that she is today. I always feel that way watching some of our young ones and others really start changing their journey into advocacy. Alejandra's another one. She's like a daughter to me, and watching her come into the woman that she is, become a support group leader. She's done forums for you back in the day, Amy, when you were doing your young adult group, and you had a panel of people, and seeing her do a blog now and get more involved in other opportunities. It's those moments that we let them know that there is all these different opportunities as a patient to make a difference. And it's a tough disease. It's a tough life living with a disease like scleroderma and all the different symptoms that have you going to doctor's appointments to the point where you should have shares in the hospital. So it's great. And I don't think people always know that they can be that person. So the example that's being set by you, Amy, and others, and getting the word out there. We're planting the seed. And then people are saying, hey, maybe I can do that. Maybe they're a little rusty at first, and then they kind of learn, how to do it. And it's wonderful. You're empowering the scleroderma community, and they're making a difference. So I think it's beautiful what you guys are doing, and we're happy to make sure that people know more about it. Anything else, Alejandra, that you wanted to ask?
Yes. Is there anything else that you guys want the audience to know that we haven't covered?
Wow, we've covered a lot. I think I just can't stress enough how important it is for patients in their own personal journey to share their story with someone, anyone, at least once. And our programs give them the opportunity to do that. You said that, it shows them that they're valued and that they can do things out of the box, but it also gives them, like it did me, a purpose. For a long time before I became what I am now, which is a patient, but also I like to think a teacher and an advocate. I really didn't know what my life was to become and where I was gonna go with it. I couldn't work, and I was sick a lot of the time, and doing the work that I do now and the work with Steffens, and particularly in the work I do with Dr. Shapiro, has really given me a fulfillment in my life and a purpose to be a contributing member to society and feel like what I'm doing is impacting and it matters. So I would say to patients out there who are nervous, it's okay. But everybody has a story to share, and your story should be heard at least once in your life, and we can help you if you're nervous. And it's very easy to do.
Beautifully said, Amy. Beautifully said. Anything else with you, Dr. Shapiro?
Yes, so we live increasingly in this age of artificial intelligence and people turning to the devices to employ it. So this is a different kind of intelligence. It's not just emotional intelligence, but it's a very personal intelligence, which complements learning in any other way. And when I went to medical school, Amy had it just slightly wrong. They weren't Uh,
Sorry.
but they weren't patient actors. And it only happened once. The patients actually, other than when you were at the bedside, there was no engagement of the patient in teaching. It was a physician, it was the chief of urology who pretended to be an individual who had to be told that he had prostate cancer and what surgery entailed. And and he reacted as a patient receiving lots of bad news. And it was the most impactful interaction I had with any physician at medical school. And I wondered why it didn't happen more. So we're trying to make it happen more, not with actors, but with people telling their own stories. And we feel it really works. And we know we've only reached a drop in the bucket in terms of health professional students. And so our goal going forward is to get our programs going at as many of the 200 medical schools there are in the country and in Canada and in lots of other schools as well, whether it be nutrition, pharmacy, occupational therapy, dentistry, so that when you have scleroderma and you walk into an office, that you will be delighted with the familiarity that the practitioner has about your disease. That's our dream goal.
You just welled my heart up again saying that, and that's what I want to see in this world. I've been in this field since 1990, and I can't believe we're still meeting people that are undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, on the wrong treatment because their doctors don't understand. And we're trying to empower our patients to understand that even rheumatologists don't always know about scleroderma. It's not just primary care and other medical professionals out there. So making that impact is so important. And I keep going back to what you're also offering is you're making sure the physicians know how important this is to really understand the patient's journey. And it's not just the symptoms, but how it impacts them also. Their support system, the mental health that's involved, the disease robbing people of their peace and independence, and you're giving them an opportunity to see that. So I love that. And when you told the story about this doctor doing that, I think the impact for the medical profession, the up and coming doctors, is that he wanted them to see him get emotional and react on emotion, and that they had to remember that, because we see sometimes in the medical profession a lack of empathy. And I think that what you guys are doing is hopefully reminding them to have an empathetic side. I almost want to say sometimes to the doctors, why are you doing this? Because you seem like you're just doing it like a robot. My own primary care, sometimes I don't, there's no connection. So I see that in the rare disease community, especially in scleroderma, that there's a personal connection. And you're making sure that these up and coming medical professionals take that seriously and don't forget the personal side of somebody's journey. So I think that's beautiful. Alejandra, anything else?
Before we end, is there any fun facts or hidden talents you would like to share?
Ooh. I'll go first. I'll give Dr. Shapiro some time to think about this. When I'm not very busy doing all the work in the scleroderma community that I do, I love to paint. I showcase some of my paintings during some of the Steffens fundraising galas, and I've given some of them away for our raffles, and it's a passion of mine. I also like to quilt, and I journal. I'm a writer. I just finished my edits for an online resource for clinicians. I'll be the only patient that wrote a chapter for this in Tech Open. It's going to be a book about scleroderma and fibrosis, from Raynaud's to fibrosis. And my chapter is all on the patient perspective. So I'm super excited and happy about that. And that was with the encouragement and gentle pushing of Dr. Shapiro. And even though it was a struggle and I wanted to pull my hair out, I'm glad I'm doing it.
I'm
So
glad you did too. I think that's beautiful. Really, really, really beautiful. Yeah, and I love that you I can't even make a stick figure, so I give you credit for being able to be a painter and be an artist. I love it. Thank you for
thank you.
sharing that. Any fun facts, Dr. Shapiro?
Well, I retired from practice a year ago, and people said, "Oh, now you have time for yourself and have fun." And uh, and actually, as I mentioned, trying to envision a path forward for the foundation to increase our impact for me is a tremendous amount of fun and a very creative process. I have also had my first photography show, and I'm about to
Ooh.
perform or read at my first story slam. So I'm trying, when I read about all of Amy's writings, it's inspired me to try to follow her footpath there and put some thoughts on paper. Um, but and putting our thoughts together to speak with you is also a great pleasure, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. I can imagine how hard it was when you retired for your patients. I'm sure they were not happy. I remember this happening a few times at UCLA with some of the renowned doctors like Harold Paulus that I used to work with. Because you have that impact, but it's obvious that you see the need in what you're doing to do that retirement. And I love photography, by the way. So I think that's great. I love that you've taken that up. And we are really honored to learn more about the Steffens Foundation. I wish we would have done this a long time ago because I think people need to understand. But I think in today's day and age with this virtual opportunity, I thank COVID for that. It's the only thing I thank COVID for is that we've been able to reach people near and far and make a bigger impact. And you guys are doing that both in person and to think about what you guys want to do to get into all these different hospitals. We've wanted to do things like this for a long time, and every once in a while we'll get a doctor we had Dr. Desai at UCI. One of her best friends was a primary care physician, and they did a whole Raynaud's talk to all the primaries at one of the Kaisers. And so it afforded the opportunity for them to learn more about Raynaud's and if it got to a certain scope, when to refer. But what you're doing is that impact. That's not, it's very difficult for organizations to try to get in and provide this education. And sometimes they don't want to collaborate with an outside entity to do it. So what you're doing is a breakthrough. And we should all be working together in the best interest of the families that we serve to make sure that the word is getting out that this can happen, and educate the doctors and empower the patients to have that story. So that's what you guys are doing. And I couldn't be prouder of the work you're doing and prouder of the opportunity to share this so people get a much broader understanding of what you guys do and your impact. And so we just want to say from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for the beautiful, beautiful work that you guys are doing. We are grateful for this, what you're doing, and we hope to help in any way we can to make sure that the word gets out for the beautiful work you're doing. Okay?
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you.